Hey everyone, my name is Anthony and I'm going to do a quick demonstration on how to connect to an Ubuntu EC2 instance via Microsoft PowerShell. So the goal of this exercise is to be able to connect from my machine, my Windows machine, through the internet to my EC2 instance. In this case, it is an Ubuntu EC2 instance. So what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to run SSH, pass in my key pair, and I want to be able to connect to the EC2 instance as the Ubuntu user. Before I show you how to connect to an instance, I'm going to go over some of the security layers involved with EC2 instances. First of all, you have the EC2 instance itself. Around that EC2 instance, you have the security group, which determines what traffic can make it to the EC2 instance that is attached to the security group over what ports. You also need to be aware of the EC2 key pair file. A lot of times this is a PEM file. This is a key that you pass when you try to SSH or connect to an EC2 instance. Also, there's the network access control list, which is attached to the subnet that the EC2 instance lives in. EC2 instances have layers of defense which prevent average people from trying to connect to your EC2 instance. In order to connect to your own EC2 instance, you'll need to make sure that you have permissions to go through these layers. For example, to allow our access for our SSH connection to the EC2 instance from our machine, we'll need to make sure, first of all, that our EC2 instance is in a subnet that actually has access to the internet, unless we are connecting through a bastion. The security group will need to make sure it has a security rule for inbound traffic, which allows port 22, which is the SSH port we're going to be using, and it needs to allow that port 22 traffic from our computer's public IP if we want to be more secure about it and not just allow all traffic. The network access control list, also known as NACL, is usually permissive to all traffic by default. But if you're having issues connecting to your EC2 instance, you'll want to make sure that there's no rule here that is preventing you from accessing. For a key pair, you'll want to make sure that when you create your EC2 instance, if you're connecting via a key pair and not using the console, you'll need to make sure that you've downloaded that key pair when you go to SSH to your machine. In this example, we have our EC2 instance placed within a VPC. A VPC in AWS is a virtual private cloud, which is just a large private network resource that you can create in your account. There's also a default VPC, which has several subnets that you can use. But in this example, we have one subnet. This one subnet has a route to the internet through what's called an internet gateway. The internet gateway is attached to a VPC, and then any subnets within that VPC, which each have route tables, will have a route in the route table, which points all other traffic noted as 0.0.0.0/0, which will then route that to the internet gateway. That is how the traffic gets from the EC2 instance, for example, in that subnet, out through using the route table to know to go to the internet gateway, which then goes out to the internet. Now that we've gone over some of the theory, I'm going to switch over to my EC2 console in my own AWS account that I've already logged into, and I'm going to show you how to create and connect to an EC2 instance. Here I already have an EC2 instance running that I created, just so that when I go to launch the new one, we don't have to wait for it to come online before we start connecting to it. So in order to launch an EC2 instance, you go to the AWS console, you can go to EC2, so you can search here at the very top for EC2. You go to instances, and here you should see a list of your instances. Do note what region you are currently logged into. I'm currently logged into Ohio. EC2 instances live in only one region at a time, so that will determine what region you're in will determine what instances you are currently looking at. So I'm going to go to launch instances right here. I'm going to give my instance a name. I'm going to call it test instance. I'm going to click Ubuntu. I'm just using a quick start image that we're going to build the server from. So I'm going to use Ubuntu. I'm not going to change much of anything else. I'm going to use T2 Micro, which is a nice small free tier eligible instance. Doing a nice little cheap example here. I'm going to go to the key pair section and I'm going to create a new key pair. I'm going to give this key pair a name. I'm going to call this my key pair.pem, my key pair-2.pem. You can name this anything you'd like. I'm going to use a .pem format, RSA format for the moment. I'm going to create the key pair. Then notice it downloads a file to your machine. Now we're going to go down to the network settings. I'm going to be specifying to create a security group, which is going to allow SSH traffic at this point from anywhere. There are ways to make this a bit more secure and not just allow anyone to access your EC2 instance, but bear in mind, in order for anyone else to access your EC2 instance, they will need your EC2 key pair to be able to access it. That is the file that we just downloaded. At this point, I'm going to keep the rest of the settings the same. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit launch instance right here on the bottom right. This will create an instance. And then I should have a link to the instance right here with the instance ID. Now if I click that, I'm now in the instances page again where I started. Now I see an instance here. Now if I click the instance, I can see the instance's information. Most important information for the moment is going to be the public IP address and the private IP address. The reason why this has a public IP address is that by default, when I created the instance, it created the instance in a already existing public subnet in a VPC that was already existing in this region, in this account. So because it's in a public subnet, and that subnet automatically associates or assigns public IP addresses, it already has a public IP address, and since I gave it the security group rule, we are now past the security group layer and the subnet layer and the route layer here. So going back to the security layers, we've made sure that our instance is placed in a subnet that is that's visible to the machine because it's in a public subnet. I've made sure that the EC2 instance has port 22 SSH traffic allowed. It is by my computer's public IP because I currently allow it to everywhere. Not the best practice, but it's doable for the moment. I did not change anything about the network access control list. I used the default, which is always open, and I'll show you that in a moment. For the key pair, I downloaded the key pair file, and I will note exactly where that location is. So now that we have the instance, we're going to try and connect to it using PowerShell. Now that we made sure our instance is running, you can then open PowerShell. You can do this easily by pressing the Windows button and then typing PowerShell. And it should be one of the first app matches that you find. It should be right here. So you're able to open the app and you should get a PowerShell window. So now that we have PowerShell open, I'm going to go into my key pairs directory that I created on my machine. I place that under Documents, Key Pairs. And then I'm going to move the key pair file that I downloaded from my downloads directory to this directory that I'm in currently. I called it my key pair-2.pem, which also appended the .pem, which is why it has two .pems at the end of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in this directory using /, and I'm going to do the same name, except I'm going to fix it, and I'm going to do .pem. Now, if I do an ls, I can see that I have those other two files here. The one that I care about is the -2 one that I downloaded earlier. So now, all I have to do in order to connect to my instance is use the command that I mentioned in the other diagram. That command is ssh-i. -i means what identity file or key file you're going to pass. In this case, I'm going to pass my key pair file, and I want to specify -2.pem. And I'm going to SSH to the Ubuntu user at the public IP, which is right here in the console. So I go there, I copy that, and I do that. Ubuntu at IP address, public IP address specifically. I hit enter. It's going to ask me that the fingerprint is something it does not recognize because I haven't connected to this machine yet. Once I say yes, I know this is the machine I want to connect to, literally just by typing yes, enter. It adds that to a list of known hosts, and now I'm connected onto the machine. You could tell because I'm on Ubuntu. You can see the IP address here. This is actually the private IP address, 172.31.13.129. You can see right here, 172.31.13.129. So we have connected to our EC2 instance. So now I could do sudo apt upgrade, for example, and it does its thing. And now we have successfully connected to our EC2 instance. If you have any questions, I'm going to be posting this diagram and putting a link in the description for anyone who's interested. If you have any questions or feedback, please use the comments, and I will try and address them as I can. Thanks for watching.